Okay, so we're talking about inductive forcefulness, which is distinct from deductive validity. With validity, if the premises are true, then the conclusion must be true. With inductive forcefulness, if the premises are true, then the conclusion is probably true. So we're trying to understand how we'll understand probability in that sentence. Okay. The book goes through on pages 116 and 117 three understandings of probability. One is understanding probability as proportion. And the best way to understand this is to just think of an example. Let's say I have a deck of cards and I pull out a card randomly, and I'm wondering what's the probability that it's an ace? Okay. And probability uh, of an ace is, now there's 4 aces out of 52 cards, so that's just going to be 4 out of 52, which is also equal 1 over 13. Okay, so one understanding of probability is just as proportion, like the proportion of cards that are ace is 4 out of 52. Here's another understanding of probability. Probability understood as frequency. So let's say I am wondering whether to watch the World Series, and I look back at my past watchings of World Series, and it's about like maybe 7 out of 10 have been fun, and the others were boring. Um, then I'm wondering, okay, this next World Series, is it going to be fun? And I think, well, looks like the probability of a fun World Series is, I might say 7 out of 10 or 70%. And with frequency, frequency probability is always about events. And so that's another way to understand probability when we're talking about frequencies of events. And you might think to yourself, isn't this really just a type of proportion? You might think the proportion of fun World Series to non-proportion to total number of World Series is 70%. Yeah, so you might think these actually end up being the same thing. And that's up for debate, and we're not going to get into that. I'm just kind of introducing some of the main points here. Now, the sort of probability that will be the focus of the book and our class will be what's called rational expectation. Okay, and here I'll just say this. It's the way I'm going to write it is a little more simple than the one in the book. The probability of P, where P is a proposition, equals the degree to which one's evidence supports P. Okay, so rational expectation understands probability just in terms of, it's called rational expectation because it's about what degree of rational confidence should you have in the truth of P, which is really the degree to which your evidence supports P. That's rational expectation. This is more for those of you who might be a philosophy major. This is sometimes called epistemic probability. Epistemic probability. Okay, but in this class, the book calls it rational expectation, so that's what I'll call it. Now, what's the point of this? Well, the book notes sometimes when we're talking about probabilities, proportion and frequency are not, it's not really as simple as just one proportion or a frequency. Let's say we're trying to calculate the probability that a Republican would win, or that even Biden or Trump would win again if Trump does run in the next election. It's really hard to talk about any single proportion or frequency to determine the probability that anybody would win. So they just leave that open and then just say it's the degree to which our evidence supports one way or another. And that's the probability, which might be just 50-50 or even lower. Um, Rational expectation is also good because sometimes in philosophy or religion, say they talk about the probability that God exists, and that might be like some evidence might support God's existence. Let's say like the seeming design or beauty of the world, or sometimes people think that suffering is evidence against God. Okay, so here we're just talking about the degree to which our evidence would support God's existence, and that would determine like how probable it is God exists. So this is how we'll understand probability in this class. Although it's good to know that proportion and frequency are relevant because proportion and frequency can be types of evidence. So these two can be actually kind of subsumed under rational expectation, also called epistemic probability. Okay, so with that, just very big picture introduction to probability, we'll move forward to a definition of inductive forcefulness.